Welcome to Pratidhwani, where we try to humanize science. I'm your host, GV Pawan Kumar. It is my absolute delight and pleasure to introduce you to my guest on this particular episode, Professor Vivek Polshettiwar. Vivek is an outstanding material chemist and has done some very important work related to nanocatalysis and its implication and application in questions related to energy conservation and also climate change issues. And Vivek, over the years, has done some very fascinating research and also mentored so many young researchers. And I have to mention also that Vivek is a very decorated scientist. He has been also awarded various different, accolades, including the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award and Falling Walls, award and IUPAC, and there are so many accolades which Vivek has garnered. But what is important is that at the core, he is an outstanding researcher, and he's very deeply interested in questions where one can use material chemistry to look at problems from energy resource viewpoint and also catalysis viewpoint, climate science issues, etc., etc. With this very short introduction, let me welcome Vivek on Pratidhwani.
Thanks, Pawan, for this opportunity, and I'm excited to chat with you on this.
Yeah, my pleasure, Vivek. So, Vivek, we'll get started with your origins. Please tell us where were you born and what was the kind of environment in which you actually grew up.
Uh-huh. So I was born in a very small village known as Mangli, which is in a Vidarbha region,
Vidarbha,
few
yeah,
hundred
yeah.
few hundred kilometers from Nagpur, near Vani. So this is very interior part of Vidarbha at that time, even now. And I did my primary education in something called Jilla Parishad schools. This is a school by the government, where everything is in obviously in Marathi up to
Mm.
10th grade. And I remember during my up to 7th grade, my school has only one building. So up to 6th, you have to sit somewhere else, sometime below the tree, sometime in some other rented places. Or only when you go to the 7th grade, you get this nice, at that time, it was a nice building, still onto the ground, not desk or something like that. So that's where I started my journey.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Vivek, a lot of people actually don't have this deep appreciation of the fact that the life growing up in a non-urban area is very different. It has its own challenges.
Yes.
And that is one of the things I would want to, of course, capture a lot more in this conversation because it's not a lot of things which people take for granted in an urban environment or even in a semi-urban environment is not available.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you give a picture of how it was growing up in the place where you were? And I know you have gone through quite a lot of hardships, and you've really scaled something which is important for people to understand. Give us just a gist of or a picture of how it was growing up in such an environment.
Yeah, obviously, I think there are many like me who started from the village, and we all know that the life in village is harsh.
Correct.
If I compare my life in Mumbai versus even today, I think it's harsh. I remember in my village, the electricity was only for a few hours. I don't know what the status now, but my during
Mm.
my time. So several times we had to study, those rock oil, the raw oil lamp. Or sometimes there will be electricity only onto the road lamp, and then you go and study below the road lamps. So obviously, you don't have the great infrastructure in the school. The number of teachers versus
Mm.
number of classes will always be less. But the positive side of it, what I feel now is the quality of the teacher that we had those days were extremely good. And I think
Mm.
at end of the day, it's all about your teachers rather than the infrastructure and everything else. And that helped us. That helped me, I guess, to grow. And I also feel that since science is extremely difficult to do, right? We have a huge amount of failure and a very small amount of a success. So since I have already grown into some sort of hardship or harsh way of life, I now my brain is prepared for failure, and then my brain is also prepared to take on challenges. Even I know that it may going to fail. So indirectly, it helped me now the way I grew during
Mm.
my childhood.
Wonderful, wonderful. Probably this also has a connection to the kind of problems you got interested in the future, right? Because
Exactly.
sometimes if you also have a lived experience of certain issues, the appreciation of a research problem would be even higher. In fact, that is common across the board in various different situations.
Exactly, exactly. I think you said it very well. So my bigger goal of my life is to really help the society, right? And I realize now that the fundamental science and obviously the translation of our discoveries can help the society. That's how it happened before, and that's how I want to achieve. I don't just want to do the research, publish the paper, get some award, and stop there. No, I really want to translate. And we now know that climate change is one of the very serious issue, right? And
Absolutely.
it has to be solved, and the way the work that we are doing and many others are doing has that potential, and I can feel the connections because I have seen the hardship of a farmers, right? And at that time obviously I was not able to do anything, but now I can at least contribute to some part of it, to take on the climate change, which will have a direct impact onto the everyone's life, including the life of farmers and villages.
Beautiful. Actually, it's a very important endeavor. In fact, that is one of the important aspects of doing research, right? Because
Yeah.
there is a social element to it, which sometimes doesn't get captured. Because people think that academics means generally, at least for the outside world, if you call somebody as an intellectual, it
Yeah.
means they're only talking about something which is which is at a society level. But scientists have such a very very important role to play when
Okay.
they have to interact with them.
Exactly.
uh,
Exactly.
yeah. So Vivek, tell us a little bit about your schooling and kind of education you got, especially what are the kind of influences you had while growing up. What is the medium in which you studied? That is
Yes.
something I'm very curious to.
Yeah, so as you said, my journey is very unique in that sense. I studied in Marathi, and during the village, I think my interest was more in languages and obviously the maths. Those are the two subjects I was very excited. Science was never there during my primary schooling, at least, and only when I and when I in fact see the another challenge that I face and even face today is the English.
Hmm.
My I learn alphabet ABCD in fifth grade. Now everyone learns in the KG1, right? And then I think I learned English grammar in when I went to the eighth grade, right?
Hmm.
And until that, the English was far away from me, and it was all Marathi. And then learning science at that time, the teacher were not that efficient in teaching science in Marathi, so I never got connected with the science as such. Only when I reached the 11th grade, I started appreciating the science part,
Hmm.
and that's where I got interested in the field of science.
Were there early influences where you got inclined towards chemistry? Because I know, people who have worked with you, your work has that element of fantastic, hands-on approach to science. I know you yourself actually are very interested in all the things. I just want to capture that aspect of it. What was it growing up? Like, do you had any specific influence in chemistry during that time?
Frankly speaking, no. I think I got interested in chemistry only when I reached to 11th or 12th, where I
Mm-hmm.
realized in the power of chemistry that you can ideally dictate these atoms and molecules to do whatever a chemist wants to do. You can make new molecules and new materials, right, by using the techniques which is unknown to the universe, to the world. So that's where I got excited about the chemistry. But before that, my dream was very different. I wanted to be a teacher because you see a great teacher around you. So I said, okay, I also want to be a primary teacher. Then you grow, then I did BSc. So I said, okay, now I want to do a BA, right? A
Mm-hmm.
bachelor and BA, and then do a high school teacher. That's how I kept growing myself, frankly speaking, rather than I never had a dream to be a scientist. And I think one of the reason could be the environment around you decides how you behave and how you dream. That's where now when I go to my village area, my area, I keep telling them that many of you have a great potential to be a great scientist. So don't confine your thoughts the way I did myself. Don't confine your thoughts to your environment. Come out of that and try bigger dreams, bigger things.
Wonderful. Actually, this is something very important for people who are listening and watching, especially those who may not have, let's say, the advantage of the geography.
Yes.
see, that is something which is very difficult to control, right? Because
Yeah.
if you're born in a place where you really don't have facilities and other things, and
Yeah.
by various different circumstances, you might not be able to have access to a big city.
Yes.
And that is one thing, Vivek, I always kind of am interested to know how should, let's say, a student or a person who is in such a kind of a place should take challenges and go ahead and do something. Because I know you have done this in your own way,
Yeah.
but there is a lesson for many people who may want to do this. Could you please tell us a little bit more?
So the way I'm doing it is that I keep traveling to these places and
Yeah.
speak to them and tell them my journey and say, oh, if I can do it, you guys can do it far better way. I just recently I went to my university
Mm,
and they were complaining that they have only two teachers, and even
mm,
25 years ago they only had two teachers. I said, okay, infrastructure is poor, you don't have a good teachers, but then you are mature enough now and you have enough knowledge around open. See, when I frankly speaking, I learned to use the internet only after I joined PhD. Frankly, this looks
mm.
very weird. Until that, I never had access of internet during the MSc days. Now kids have the access to the internet,
Absolutely.
everything. The knowledge is there. It's just how hard you work and how motivated you are. Even the another challenge that I felt, especially for school kids, those who are not studying in an English school, is the language,
Mm,
right? So recently, when I went to my BSc college, then I asked the principal whether I should give a talk in English or Marathi, and they all said, "No, no, give in Marathi. That's the only way you can really sensitize."
mm,
And I gave it twice, one for a 10th and 10 to 12 student, and another for the BSc student. And I realized that many students came to me.
mm.
So I think language is another issue that we have
Issue.
to appreciate. We are not an Englishman. We have our own mother tongues, and we know the way we can learn from our own mother tongue. We can't learn in English, right? So why do we need to copy the Western world? Can we not try at least some part of the science we discuss in Marathi or any mother tongue? Right? Maybe the writing, the equations, and the
Yeah.
schemes could be difficult, but many part of a discussion can be done in Marathi, and that is helping. That is really helping to even now.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
even what I do, even when I make a slides, I make a slide where the title is in English as well as in Marathi, so
Uh-huh.
that you can also learn the terms in English and Marathi. These things will help, I guess.
This is actually something very important, Vivek. Yeah, I've been actually telling and talking about this aspect quite a bit in the podcast, because the everyday language, if science has to penetrate into society deeply,
Yeah,
it has to be actually via language.
exactly.
Because language is what, even if you go to a new place, if you are an expat, if you talk the language of the that particular place, the people actually are very 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 receptive. And
Yes.
even if you talk with broken Marathi, like what I do in Pune, of course, people are so kind of generous. They actually have okay in terms of other languages too. But
Yeah.
this is a very important point. And second point, as you mentioned, is that the role of the internet, which can really be a game changer. One may actually bash internet, especially in the social media era, because the exposure mainly one is looking at from a viewpoint of, let's say, the urban areas. But
Yeah.
for rural areas, actually, it's one of the biggest things. If a good internet connection is there, it can
Yeah.
be a game changer.
Game
You're
changer.
right. Yeah. So, Vivek, now that you actually are finishing your work, give us a brief gist of your environment at home. Was it very encouraging environment, or what kind of support you got, and your influences while growing
Yeah,
up?
so my family, so my mother was a teacher until she got married, and then she
Nice. Yeah.
got the job. So obviously she was interested in education.
Hmm.
My father was also at that time he was the first postgraduate in my village. He did
Wow.
M.Com obviously, but he decided to do a farming rather than doing the job, farming and some small business. And both of them always encouraged me to study and
Hmm.
do higher education. Although in my community, it's always about the business.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
study either you do a farming or a business related to the farming. But I was the first student in my village who did the science. Until that, it was
Nice.
always art because nearby there was no college, science colleges. Science college was far away, and it was expensive to go there at that time, obviously. But then they pushed me to go to the science, and I want to tell you the story. So until 11th, all my education was in Marathi. And then I went to this college where now they are teaching science in English.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever they write on the board, I can follow, but whatever they say, I can't follow anything, frankly speaking. And it was a shocker. So after a few months, I decided to withdraw. I said, okay, I can't do the science. I have to do art the way everyone is doing and learn in Marathi. So I ran from the college and went back to home and say, okay, I can't do it. I can't do the science. See the turning point in my life. My father sent me back and said, even you fail, it's okay, but you have to do science. Just go back. He forcefully sent me back, and now I'm a scientist. Can you imagine? Otherwise, if he could have say, okay, beta, aage, you stay here now and do the what other people are doing, I could have been doing the farming or a business. So I think they played a very critical role in my journey all the time. All the time.
Mr. Polshettiwar Senior really deserves a lot of credit.
Sure.
That's a remarkable point, Vivek. You
Yeah.
know that is the kind of backing. It's not the only the financial backing. It's the intellectual backing, and also that support what you can get is gone a long way.
Yes.
A truly
Indeed.
remarkable point
Yeah.
actually. So during this time, you're learning in a language which is not familiar to you, and you're actually grasping a lot of things. One of the things I have found, this is my general observation, is people who may not be well versed in English but who actually are generally interested in science,
Yeah.
sometimes their understanding of certain aspects is slightly better. you know this is my own lived experience. I have also seen a lot of people having worked with a lot of students. They may not be very articulate in the language of English,
Yeah.
but they really know the science.
Exactly.
That knowing, like Feynman also mentions, there is a difference between knowing and naming, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that is something I want to just get capture, kind of understand a little bit. How was your experience while learning? I know you really did well, but I just want to know what was your experience then.
I completely agree with you, Pawan. I
Mm,
think it's exactly the same experience for me. Even now, when lots of students comes
mm, mm.
from different parts of the country in our institute, several of them are not good in speaking,
Mm.
are presenting thin English, but they are very deep. And
Very, yes.
right, so it's very clear, and I think this is obvious that the English language has nothing to do with the science part, right?
Science.
It's,
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
it's, it's how you understand, how deep you think, how differently you think. And several times when we have a group discussion, we start in English, but I realize several times we go to Hindi because everyone understands
Mm,
Hindi,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? It's very natural, and we never even know that when we change from English to Hindi.
Mm.
But I realize thinking and speaking in your own language, or a language which all of us can follow, is more efficient, and one can think more deeper than the English. Obviously, doesn't mean that English is a bad language or something, but this is
Yeah,
how
yeah.
we are grown, right?
Grown. Yeah. Yeah, true, true. It's such an important thing. For example, even for me, a real grounding of poetry or appreciation of an art really comes only when I listen, for example, Kannada poem or something like that.
Yeah,
There is, means, of course, one may be able to appreciate other languages, but it is never the same as, let's say, your own, lived experience, and also the language in which you have grown up, mother tongue,
yeah,
and other
yeah,
things.
yeah.
Fabulous, fabulous. So, Vivek, I want to also know a little bit about the kind of subjects you actually got exposed to during your formative years, especially when you are now going into college and learning something. What was the kind of stuff you learned during that time?
Yeah, so in 12th, it was all biology, chemistry, maths,
Mm.
physics.
Physics, yeah.
And even during the BSc, our course was covering all the three subjects: chemistry,
Mm.
physics, and maths,
Yeah.
non-biology.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Okay.
I personally feel that that really helped me now because see,
Yes.
I did my PhD in organic chemistry, but I don't work in organic chemistry anymore.
Mm.
I'm more now a condensed matter physics or more a material.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So that means I need to have a basic knowledge about the physics, about the maths, and the learning in the BSc definitely helped me. Otherwise, if we could have, I could have only learned chemistry during the BSc, and then obviously in MSc you are only chemistry. It would have been I could have been just doing the small organic reactions here and there. But So what I feel is sometimes, specializing in a very early
Early
stage may not
stage.
be a good idea, may not be a good idea. I think the way the science is and the way, if you really want to solve the challenging problems, we all know this is a multidisciplinary. And the way we work now and the collaboration we have, we need to know many, many other subjects. For that, you need to have some basic knowledge of that subject. Otherwise, you cannot learn new things, right? So that really,
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I have similar experience because I too had physics, mathematics, and electronics as my
uh-huh,
three subjects. In fact, so much so that there's a lot of mathematics I had to learn.
uh-huh,
Now it serves me very well in physics and other areas. I agree with
physics,
you.
yeah.
Yeah. So during that phase, were you also already thinking about chemistry in a deeper way that it can become part of your future career and other things, or was it something which you you were yet to decide on that? Yeah.
Yet to decide. Let me be very frank with you, Pawan.
Mm, mm,
Chemistry was my second preference.
mm,
My most exciting subject during the BSc was physics, and I
mm,
wanted to do my master also in physics. But
mm,
then, I'm come from a middle class in the region where
mm, mm.
the objective of learning, higher education is about job. Whether
Yes,
you get
yes.
a job and a good salary, and everybody said that if you do a chemistry, you
Mm,
have a better opportunity to get the job. I'm just trying to be very frank, and obviously, chemistry was also my favorite subject, but not
mm.
as great as physics. So then, because of that, I chose chemistry at that time during my third year of BSc. But now I do more physics than chemistry. I'm
Yeah.
agnostic. So you are indirectly you get connected to your natural desire
That's
of subject.
exactly, exactly. This is a very important lesson for people, right? You can always revisit your interest,
Yes,
especially in a research career. That is one of the very fulfilling aspect of doing research,
yes,
because nobody is going to stop you from exploring questions and connecting it to something which you may be interested in while growing up and things
yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Fabulous, fabulous. So take us through the journey post 12th standard into the college and then forward. Where did you study? What was the kind of college you went to? What was the kind of environment in which you did your bachelor's and master's?
Yes. So I did my bachelor's in Lokmanya Tilak College
Mm,
in
mm,
Wani. We call them LT College, which is one of
mm.
the popular college
Popular.
at
Yeah.
that time. So it's a 3 years program, and where we, as I said, we studied all the three subjects: chemistry, physics, and maths. And obviously, first year you also learn Marathi and English. And there we got a great teachers. The one of the key uh, uh, advantage for me during all while I was growing, even the colleges may be small, infrastructure wise may not be that great in terms of lab and experiment, but the teachers were great. I can say I had a physics teacher, Professor Arvind Karkhanis, one
Mhm.
of the best teacher. Even today, if I had to rate teacher, he will be one of the best. The way he taught us and challenged our thinking ability. Then I also had a great chemistry teachers. Like one of
Mhm.
the teacher I can remember is Professor Aswale. So she used to be very strict. So several times she used to take a test in the class, and if it is a 20-mark test and if you get 18, it's like you are very happy. I got 18 out of 20. She said, no, why 18? Why not 20? She used to say, why you have 2 mark less? Why can't it be 100%? And that changed my thought process. I said, okay, why do I aim for 80% and not 100%?
Mhm. Mhm.
And that I do now even today. Whenever I do something, I try to give my 100%.
Mhm.
Obviously, the output is not in your hand, but at least the input has to be 100%. So all the time during primary education, high school, college, and bachelor, I got a great teachers. During my master, where I went to Amravati University, now they call this as a Sante Gadge Baba Amravati University.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, there were only two teachers, such a huge class and only two teachers. Even now, after 25 years, they have only two teachers. I don't know what is going on in that university. So obviously, they are not doing only teaching, but all the administration. So
Mhm.
most of the teaching was done by these fresh masters coming from the same college. Frankly speaking, except one or two, we did not have a great teacher during the
Mhm.
master. But then at that time, you are matured enough to learn by yourself. You have
Yourself.
we had a great library, so we had a group of friends who used to sit together, learn, discuss, debate, and that is where my chemistry has grown.
Mm.
I have one of my best friend Atul Wankade. He is now professor in VNIT. So we used to have many debates at that time in the BSc, MSc
Mm.
about different topics, and that really helped me to go deeper, understand more, and even challenge what is written in the book. Right, that's how the research is. You don't need to really accept everything that is
Accept
written.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So that's how.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Superb, superb. See, you also brought up a close friendship, which plays such a critical role,
yeah,
because a good friend, uh, especially during the age where you're growing up and trying to intellectually, expand your horizons,
yeah.
a person whom you can actually have very strong discussion with is very critical, right? I'm sure that would have had a very strong influence on you.
It's extremely critical. I think you need to have good friends and the friends
Yeah,
who are ready to criticize you rather than only
yeah.
say a good thing about you. And I think this continues even during your professional position as a professor. You want your colleague to be someone who can criticize you
Absolutely,
in a
absolutely.
positive sense. Yeah.
Absolutely, that's a important thing in a positive sense. That's
Yeah.
so important. I because that is one of the great things about doing science, because there
Uh,
is some kind of checks and balance, and but one should not go into a level where you are criticizing just because of the sake of criticizing, and
that
that's
also
very
happens.
important. That
That
all
is
that
unfortunately that is happening.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that happens a lot. That happens a
Yes.
lot. Unfortunately, sociological aspect does not actually because science is anchored in an environment and it cannot escape the realities of the
Reality,
social.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
think
yeah.
unfortunately that happens more, and that's one of the challenge for Indian academia
Okay,
to
yeah, yeah,
somehow stay away from these. I will call them a sadistic critics
yeah, yeah,
rather than
yeah,
positive critics.
yeah,
But that is not in our hands. So my way is just ignore them and
yeah,
focus on
yeah.
the positive.
True. In fact, this is something a very important lesson, right? Because Vivek, a lot of students, including ourselves, when we are growing up, we have a very kind of idealistic picture of pursuit of science. You see
Yeah,
a scientist, you hear their talk, and you find, oh wow, this is very fascinating.
yeah.
Two things really, hit hard when you start doing research. One is most of it is failure, right? Especially
Exactly. Yeah, you have to
if
be
you're in a
prepared.
yeah, in a laboratory situation, majority of the stuff doesn't work. I'm not
That
telling
is.
work. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and then one of the challenge that I feel nowadays is the students. I'm now in TIFR for last 12 years, and I see
yeah,
the strength of a student to accept the failure is somehow going down. Right? They from day one they want their experiment to be
yeah,
successful.
yeah.
They want always a successful data, and that is not possible. Right? If you're really doing a good science, challenging science, not a some sort of an incremental mix and match, most of the time it will not work,
Not work.
right? But we learn, and I keep discussing this with the student. When experiment fails, you start thinking more deeper, and
Yeah.
you learn more from those failed experiment, and then one day, then you get a the successful experiment and prove your hypothesis.
Very nice, very nice. So that's one learning. Of course, that failure is always kind of inbuilt into the system. Second is that science, the pursuit of science, although it is objective, the science happens in an environment because there's this kind of influence of a lot of other things around science, both positive and negative.
Yeah,
Because flavor of doing science, for example, you go to different countries, different people work in a different way,
exactly.
but there are also some negative influences sometimes where there might be no infrastructure or some kind of that culture might not be there, etc.
Yeah,
This is always an important aspect. And I want to also ask, in that sense, you have been able to also think about problems which are grand. Okay. I will come to the very specific questions you and your research group have been pursuing over the years. But before that, I just want to know the, building up of Vivek as a researcher. You
yeah,
know, during BSc or MSc also, you have some idea, but it is only when you transition from the masters to, let's say, a research question,
yeah.
that a person becomes a little bit more mature and starts worrying about a question. Worrying in the
Exactly.
sense, not a negative worry, but really, thinking deeply about a problem.
Yes.
Tell us that process, Vivek. How you gradually got into that stream of becoming a researcher.
Yes. So after master only, I decided that I should do a PhD, and then I joined this institute in Gwalior called DRDE,
Mm,
which is the DRDO's lab for chemistry and life
mm,
sciences. I will say it was not a great place to do a PhD, frankly speaking, right? So the now when I compare the academic culture in TIFR,
mm, mm,
the culture where I did my PhD was absolutely nowhere, right? Uh, and there it was again a fundamental science. I don't know why they were doing a fundamental science that time, even now, but it was about developing some synthetic processes. It's organic chemistry where you want to convert oxygen into sulfur, the thionation, sulfur.
mm,
You make different organosulfur compounds by using some sulfur donating reagents. So obviously, I was new to the entire thing. So I thought this is the challenging problem that my PhD supervisor gave it to me, and I worked on it. But I think 2 years down the line, I realized that what I'm doing is not that great, frankly speaking.
mm.
I by that time I got mature, not when I joined, but after 2 years I got mature enough saying, why I used to ask this question that why I'm using somebody else catalyst, which is already there, published, reported by, developed by somebody, and I'm just using that and mixing something and translating, say, phenol to thiol or ether to sulfide, something like that. So that time, it clicked to me that I'm not really doing the great thing that I want to do.
Mm,
And one of the thing that I wanted to that time is that I want to synthesize my own catalyst by my own ways rather than taking someone else. Obviously, during the PhD, that was not possible, frankly speaking. There was no such a culture of taking on the challenging problem, right? Typical of the small institute where they want to
mm,
do some cooking, publish papers, and get the degree. Frankly speaking, just to accept that, I followed the same,
mm,
and I got the degree. And then at that time, I decided to go to a place where I can learn the synthesis of a materials, which is the basis of all these catalytic systems. And that's where I chose the École de Chimie in Montpellier. If you see
yeah.
the Montpellier is the region where most of the best silica synthesis groups are
Synthesis,
there.
yes.
Yeah, so all the
Yeah.
isopropyl
Montpellier,
silica.
by the way, Montpellier is in France, right? France.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in France, south of France,
Yeah.
south of France.
South of
Yes,
France.
yes, yes.
Beautiful place, actually. Yeah.
Beautiful place, and
Yeah.
they had a great culture of designing new materials.
Mm,
So that's where I spent around a year and learn how to make these silica. And now even today, my research focuses on making the new materials,
yes.
silica-based materials. So that's where I learn. That's where I learn to take on the challenging problem. Obviously, in France, I had an issue of language. At that time, again,
Mm,
it was they used to do everything in French, even the PhD thesis and discussion. But by that time, I learned how to make the new material. Then I went to States where now I
yeah.
combine my real dream during the PhD that I make my own catalyst and then do a reaction. And that's what I did in during my EPA with Professor Verma. But then you keep growing yourself, right? At that time, also, I was very happy saying, "Oh, I'm doing all these great green chemistry reactions, publishing many papers." But then I realized again, this was in third year or fourth year, that it's okay, but it's not that great that I'm doing. I really want to go deep, really understand why these reactions are happening at a molecular level, how the surface chemistry is. That is something again was not I was not able to do there because of the focus of the lab or the way they were thinking. So then if you see my journey, then when I moved to Kaust,
Mm.
Kaust was one of the greatest place, and even now I think it's one of the greatest place down for doing extraordinary science,
Research, yeah.
extraordinary research. You have a magical facilities. Funding
Mm,
was not the issue. You get a good postdoc, may not be a good student, but then I used that entire environment, and they hired some of the best faculty, senior
mm,
as well as junior, and then yeah, it was having a great environment there. So that's where I changed my entire research focus from
mm.
just simply making some material and doing some organic transformation. I then decided to do some more challenging stuff where when I make a new material, can I then understand why I made those material? What is the formation mechanism of those materials? It's extremely challenging, not like organic reactions where you do NMR, IR, mass, and you get the structure. In materials, you need to do many things to really understand the structure and understand how they are forming. And now, when I come to TIFR, we added one more thing where now we're not only understanding the formation mechanism of the materials, but how these material interacts with different reactant molecules, the CO2, hydrogen, and any other molecule, the surface chemistry, the interfaces. That is again very challenging. So we collaborate with many people, solid-state NMR, X-ray absorption techniques, many other techniques. And the third point that we added in last few years is we now want to have a material which is not only catalytic and interact with the molecule, but they can also harvest the solar energy, solar photons, and that's more of photophysics now. And that's where we now need to take help from the physicist and the concept of physics
Yes.
to understand how these materials are able to harvest the photon, how you generate these electrons, how you give these electrons to the CO2 or something like that. So there is a dramatic
Okay.
change in my journey of doing the research in terms of the question that you said, the level of question that I wanted to ask, it kept increasing every year, and that's what we are doing even now. I think another 15 years of my research, I hope to go to the next level.
Next is wonderful, wonderful, fabulous. Before we actually go into the actual, research of your own research group, which I am going to come in a couple of minutes, I want to also know your kind of broad learning from that phase before you moved back to India. That is a crucial thing because I
Yeah.
always ask that question to everybody of why they move back to India.
Uh-huh.
Because with this kind of background, this kind of place, KAUST is one of the best funded places in the world, not
Yeah.
just in one part of the world. You across the world, it is considered as one of the great facilities for doing research.
Yeah.
And second point is also, Vivek, you had exposure in various different places, including in Europe and in US. And in
Yeah.
US, you actually worked, if I'm correct, in Oak Ridge
No, Chris gave me the fellowship. I work in
fellowship.
Environmental Protection Agency, EPA.
EPA. So
Yeah.
that's actually a regulatory body in US,
Yes. Yes.
which has had a long kind of distinction of having recognized a lot of problems before it became a problem, right?
Yes.
Climate science
Yeah. Yeah.
related aspect.
Yeah.
So I just want to get your overview of your broad lessons because you worked all the way from a place where resources were actually not that kind of available to places where things are at the cutting edge,
Yes.
and this is a broad window. And what is your biggest learning, Vivek? Because science has always remained with you, but
Yes.
the places and the facilities change. Give us that particular kind of breadth what you have in terms of the exposure in the
Yeah.
place where you work.
So I think this is a very important question. So there was a dramatic change when I moved from DRD Gwalior
Mm,
to France. One is obviously the infrastructure. The MOPLA lab had far better infrastructure
mm,
than the DRD Gwalior. I'm just trying to compare.
yeah.
But other is the working culture. There
Mm,
they wanted to really solve challenging problems in the synthesis, ask difficult questions,
mm,
right? And the focus was not always publishing papers, many
mm,
papers. Even a one good paper in a year, but
mm,
very in depth, is good
mm,
for them. Whereas in DRD, it was all about how many papers you can publish. That's how the culture
mm,
is. Another problem that I faced in DRD, and I think many institutes in our country, is we do have lots of good infrastructure. We have lots of
mm.
facilities, but they don't allow each other to use. Right? That's the unfortunate truth even today. So even there is an MR instrument there or a TM there, I can't use it because that is owned by somebody else. Ideally, it's owned by the taxpayers' money. But this is how. But in France, it's the other way around. Everything is open for everyone. Right? It's not nobody's property, and that really helped to do good science and learn to go deeper. And then when I went to the States, obviously it was more applied challenges about the environment. So I worked on these green chemistry issues where can I do the synthesis using non-conventional energy sources like microwave or using water as a solvent rather than the organic solvent. So I felt that was very exciting, though I am going to contribute towards the so-called green chemistry. But the only challenge that I faced during the my postdoc in the United States is the demand of publishing, which for first few years I also felt yes I should publish more because that's how I'm going to get a job in somewhere, right? That's how the culture is. But then I realized if you publish too many papers, which I did, you lose the quality, you lose the depth, you because you don't have time. You write something, you again do something, you again write, and there's no time to think and go deeper. So, but I realized that and I changed it. If you see my last year of my postdoc, I did not publish many. I published few very good
Mm.
papers, and that was a turning point for my research learning, that we need to stop in this rat race of publishing and doing some
Publishing. Yeah.
incremental work, and can we not do high quality work, and that's what is required, right? Right now, it's more a publisher is getting rich rather than we are contributing
Absolutely.
the new science. Obviously, Kaust was the best experience for me.
Mm.
It was one of the well funded and infrastructure wise, and everything was open. You can get training to any of your instrument. Your student can get training. You book online, and it's like several times we used to plan some synthesis, and I said, okay, by tomorrow the synthesis will be over, and I want to do TM, SEM, NMR, etc. I book everything exactly on that time. You get it, get the sample, run the to the instrument and do it. That looks like a magical thing. Even today in India, in my institute, I suffer. We don't have a proper DM, proper XRD, and even now. But there it was a magical thing. And then, but as you can see my journey, so I come from a very small place, and I have seen the harsh reality of
Mm.
the farmers and people living in an interior part of the country. They are still not that developed.
Mm.
We have two India in one India. So I have always wanted to contribute, right?
Mm.
And so I spent around 4 years in cows. I had enough, frankly speaking, earning to
Mm.
be happy in India. And at that time, we decided to come back and started applying. Uh, and my because one of the key reason we always think about is a salary, right? Salary in
Mm.
cows versus salary in TIFR. So there was 90% reduction in my salary. Can you
Oh
imagine?
man.
Right. So lots of my relatives say that what are you trying to do? Why are you coming back? But then that was one of the best decision of my life. I'm very happy. I think he has its own rule, but it's not the priority, right?
Fabulous. Yeah, kind of, to draw interesting parallel, when Raman moved from Indian Financial Service to become a Palit professor in Kolkata, he took a big cut,
Aha, aha, aha.
in his salary. In fact, that was a very large cut because the kind of lifestyle he had, and also privileges he had,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the rest is history, so to speak. you know.
And Pawan, since we're talking about the salary, why we the scientists and the professors have a very less salary? We should have the teachers, professors, scientists should have the highest possible salary,
Yeah, yeah, you're
right?
right.
We are the nation builder, but somehow
Absolutely.
no one is appreciating that part, right?
No, Vivek, I can't agree more. In fact, you ask anybody, and I've been having this conversation. The biggest and the best memories always, including what you mentioned in your conversations, is when you talk about education, you'll talk about your teacher,
Teachers, exactly.
especially primary level teacher.
Yeah,
It is something which is unfortunate. I think they are the people who are, as you mentioned, building the nation. They
yes,
are the people who are really laying the foundation. It's not somebody else. It's somewhere, sitting in the high society, high priests
yeah,
of big organizations. They have their own role, but teachers are so important. I
yeah.
second your point, Vivek. In fact, that is something. If somebody who is influential public policy maker, please take this as a request. Give a little bit more emphasis to especially primary level
Primary,
teachers,
all the teachers, I guess, they
all the
play all
teachers.
the
Yeah,
role, and but this is everybody knows this somehow, but I don't know
yeah.
why no one is taking the decision
In
in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, that is something which has been a persistent problem over the years. It's not like only in recent times.
Yeah,
For I think ever since 1947, I don't see that is because I think the primary education has not been also given a lot of emphasis. That is another problem.
another
Uh,
problem, and
yeah.
especially in the government school now,
Hmm.
because the quality of the teacher is going down because you
Hmm.
get a better salary in the private school. I don't. No one is going to the
No,
government
he's
school,
gone. Yeah, yeah.
and then I don't know. I don't know. This has to be looked into very
Looked into.
seriously and very urgently. Yeah.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you on in this particular point. So Vivek, now that you made a transition, across the world, everywhere you work, and then you come back to India, Mumbai. and you are establishing your lab 2013. That transition, of course, apart from other things what we talked about, would also be a cultural change in terms of the way and the pace at which you have to function. Although
Yeah.
TFR is one of the outstanding research institutions in India, probably the premier institution to do cutting edge research. And there are not many places in India. Probably IISc matches it in terms of infrastructure, etc. So, first of all, you mentioned about the motivation to come back, which is actually very nice to learn about. But you would also find some challenges, right? Even though you're coming to a very good institutions, what were the kind of challenges you faced?
Yeah, many challenges as you can appreciate. Obviously, the one of the greatest thing that happened in my life is getting the position in TIFR. It is one
Mm,
of the best place even today, and I think thanks to our founder Dr.
mm,
Homi Bhabha and his vision, the
mm.
way the culture here is extremely rich,
Yep,
right?
yep, yep.
Uh, but my journey was not that smooth. One of the problem of our institute is the space, lab space. We
Yeah,
are
yeah.
situated near the sea, surrounded by navies and army colonies, so we can't grow. We can't have a
Grow,
building.
yeah.
So when I came here, they gave me a store godown around 500 square feet and say, okay, you build your lab here. It was a dark room, no electricity, no plumbing, nothing, and I'm a pure synthetic materials chemist. I need water, electricity. So, and I came from Kaust with a five-star lab and very nice accommodation. I don't go to the person. Our accommodation in TIFR was really crazy that time, even now. But in terms of professional, this was the biggest shock.
Yeah,
And at
yeah.
that time, I really felt that I made a mistake of coming here,
Mm,
coming back to, and I'm going to vanish now, and I will
mm,
spend my energy. And this is the government organization, so anything you want to do, contract service, everything has to go through this paperwork.
mm,
And I realized it is going to kill my career. That's where I thought, and I wrote a strong letter to my institute director at that time that okay, I'm done now. It looks like my career is going to finish. Then, right, there's always some good people around you who wants to help you. And one of that was Professor Sanjay Vategaonkar. He was the chairman of our department, and he realized my stress and my that I'm losing it. So he just walked in and helped me to convert these empty spaces into a good lab within a year. So it took me 1 year to translate
mm,
this
mm.
go down into the lab. Same time, he gave me some small lab where I can do sound synthesis so that I'm doing some research. Otherwise, how can
Yeah.
you be there without doing anything? But it was a challenge. It was extremely challenging. The Somehow I got the lab. We started synthesizing. I work in a field of nanomaterials, so
Yeah.
you need these TEM, SEM, ideally every day to see them, see the nanomaterials. And we had a TEM machine and SEM machine in
Mm,
instrument in another condensed matter physics. But the person, the professor who was in charge, was some sort of a, frankly speaking, this narrow-minded guy who said, "This is my instrument. Nobody can touch it. We will only give you some time somewhere, and you use it." Ideally, such an instrument should be used 24/7,
mm,
right? So the Titan is around 40 crores or something now, but it was used even maybe 5 6 hours a day, right? And most of the time, so I was very shocked. I came from Kaust where everything
mm,
can be booked, used 24/7, and
mm.
suddenly here you have to praise the guy to get some time. So it was a big shock, and I said, okay, now what? How do I manage? So that situation never changed, frankly speaking, although it improved a bit. But then I had lots of collaborators where I took their help and somehow managed to get the characterization done. uh, so this is one of the challenge where you have to build your lab from the scratch and with a limited support. Other challenge that I faced was my background. The way I come to TIFR is from small village, and the
Mm,
PhD is not from that great institute, and so my PhD guide is not unknown to everyone. So I'm not from that
mm.
some sort of a group of elites, right? And I remember whenever the student come to the TIFR, the student has to choose the PI where they
PA.
want to do the
Mm,
PhD. So one of the students who joined me, he told me the story that lots of other faculty in your department is saying, "ये तो गांव का बंदा है, is from village and did PhD from some unknown place. Why you want to join that group and not me?" So that was the level of what
Level
you
of.
see negative criticism. But at the end of the day, science has nothing to do with your background, your language, anything. It's all about the quality and the novelty of the work. And then once it starts, now I get a good flow of a student. Third problem that I face is uh, some sort of a biases. I just want to
Mm,
talk this openly. Our country ka serious problem is the regional biases.
mm, mm.
Uh, and there were some group of people who always want to support their own guys. Even they are not doing great, and even there is someone like me who is doing great, they don't want to support, and they try to create lots of confusion and criticism and because of this jealousy and ego. That was one of the biggest challenge for me
Mm.
to face because I come from a background where I'm not that great in a speaking in a polished way. I generally speak what I feel in my heart. That typical gaon ka aadmi wala thing. Even today it comes out. But whereas these are the people who are learn from some of the best
Mm.
institutes during their PhD, during the post, they are very polished, right? Even they want to give you the gali the way they give you, it feels like they are telling you something good, right? So I had a huge struggle to tackle them even now. But then I learned at the end of the day, all of this is a secondary.
Secondary.
If you do good science, if you are focused on your science and ignore all of this, one can do good science, and that's the best place is the TIFR. TIFR, even if there are these type of people and these type of challenges, in TIFR you are appreciated if you do a good science,
Good side. Yeah.
quality science. Don't worry about the number of papers and don't worry about what others says. And that's why I got a tenure just in 3 years. Generally,
Mm,
it takes
mm.
6 years in TIFR. I got promoted from associate to full in 5.5 years, which again several time take 8 years, 9 years. So TIFR has this inbuilt system again, thanks to
I
Dr.
see.
Homi
Yeah.
Bhabha,
Baba.
that you will always get appreciated, and that gives you the energy of doing the great science because we know at the end of the day there is a support system. Even if there are some negative things, there are many positive things which will overshadow all these challenges. But as you said, it's not easy to set up the group in India,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and even you set up, it's not easy to do a good science, and that has to be changed everywhere.
Change. Vivek, there are two very important things I have to kind of emphasize. One is the strength of the institution, as you mentioned. What happens at the individual level sometimes actually uh, can really perturb a lot of work, as you mentioned. But if the institutions are very strong, if there's a good culture of doing science, you can see that it still encourages people who are doing well and really tribute to TFR in that way. Because if the system actually is already kind of designed in such a way that it doesn't really, perturb a person who wants to do good work, it's a reflection of good institutional policies, etc.
Yeah.
Second point is also at an individual level, Vivek. You could have probably thought, okay, these are all negative things, and it would have probably put you down. For sure, a lot of people would get really badly affected. We have
Yes.
seen scores of people who have quit science
Yeah.
many a
Yeah.
times or quit the place
Yeah.
at the least. So it means that there is a resilience which actually comes into picture. There is a strength of character,
Yeah.
and most importantly, the deep, passion and connection and love for doing science.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That one that I agree. Both these character is very important. But there's a third thing that really
Mhm,
helped
mhm.
the younger starting researcher, which I was lucky enough to have, is the mentors. Although you
Mentors.
think
Yeah.
that you're a professor now, you're starting your
Yeah.
career and you
Absolutely.
are by yourself, but you need a mentor. Luckily, I had great mentors: Sanjay Vategawkar, Professor Sanjay
Mm,
Vategawkar, Professor Rusu, Professor Chari, Professor
mm,
Madhu. So they, Professor Ranjan Das,
mm,
they treated me like their kid, like their son,
mm.
and they guided me. Right.
Nice.
So that's what I say. There are many negative things, but then I don't know whether you believe in God or not. But then the
Mm.
God makes a scenario around it such that there are people who will help you. And this is my experience all my life. We always have a challenge, but then there are always these people who will come and help you and give you a proper direction. And that was the third parameter that helped me to remain floated in this system.
Beautiful, beautiful, Vivek. Although I should mention that I'm an atheist, but even then, what you mentioned is very, very important. The people actually are so critical.
Yeah.
It's so important, Vivek. You mentioned it. There is also an aspect of paying forward. That is one thing I've also noticed. You encourage your students because now you're in a position. where you actually have not only done excellent work, but also in a position where you can, help people in terms
Yes.
of, growing their intellectual life in a slightly better way. And
Yeah.
I found that to be very, very important. And what you do is something which should actually be getting more emphasis, because I've seen a lot of things what you post and also talk about, and
Yeah.
you are not scared of talking about certain things which is supposed to actually happen for a betterment of
Better.
science.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
That's very important point, Pawan, that
yeah,
not many people are speaking out,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I don't know why. I'm a hardcore nationalistic.
Mm.
Whatever I'm writing or doing is just to help the country in terms of a betterment of Indian academia, Indian education. That's how the country will grow. That's the learn. So that's what my objective is always to bring a positive change, and this is inbuilt in the way I have grown. I have seen the challenges, and I know if this improves, how the science will improve. I have already suffered a lot because of all
Yeah,
these
yeah.
CD policies and way some people treat the new faculty. So if we change this, I think Indian science can grow faster, and we
Faster.
can
Yeah.
do a breakthrough science.
Very nice, Vivek. In fact, that is something one should appreciate, and even I have a feeling that sometimes we don't appreciate that there can be various different ways of thinking. In fact, this is something as academics and as scientists, uh, there is somewhere where the society can learn a little bit more from the way scientists actually do their work. I'm not
Yes,
talking about how they do the science aspect. Of course, that itself is very interesting. The philosophy of science, which I am very deeply interested about, is has its implication. But there is a lesson of how, let's say, a society can organize from the way you approach a scientific problem. Like,
yes,
beautifully, that's where I want to also segue and ask a little bit more about the questions what you and your research group have been asking, Vivek. In fact, one of the very impressive aspect, which I am anyway linking in the description, some of the references to Vivek's papers, where so a wondrous material called as porous kind of material, which
silica.
is
Yeah,
made of silicon. I'm not giving all the technical details because there might be some general audience who will be watching this.
yeah.
That remarkable material, that black gold, what you also call it. Tell us a little bit about that part of your work, Vivek, and also how it connects to the broader questions what you and your research group is asking, and also generally the questions what you have been interested in recent
Yes,
times.
yes. See, the bigger question that we're asking is how do we stop the climate change?
Mm, mm.
And we all know one of the key reason for the climate change is the excessive CO2, the carbon dioxide in the environment. Now, the simple way of stopping the global warming and combating the climate change is take all that CO2 from the environment and store somewhere, right? It looks simple, but there is a problem in this entire approach that once you somehow capture, even the capturing is difficult. But once you capture, you store somewhere. Where do you store? They say, okay, store under the ground, below the seabed, and that should solve the problem, or the empty wells. But we all know that CO2 is such an unreactive molecule, it will not bind with anything for a certain time. So that means it's loosely there. And if there is earthquake or if there is some leak, all the CO2 will come out, and you can imagine the sudden warming of the globe. So our hypothesis is, and not ours, but many hundreds and hundreds of researchers working on it, is that not only capture but convert that CO2 into something useful. And if you look around us, most of the thing is made up of a carbon, artificial
Yes.
things. CO2 has a carbon. So can I not use the carbon, so CO2 as a carbon source, and make polymers, even carbon steel, cement, petrol, everything around us. Even people are thinking about making glucose, fructose, and food out of it. So this sounds very fascinating that I can use CO2 now, which is a waste, to do something. But the problem is the basic of chemistry is CO2 is extremely stable molecule, non-reactive. It won't convert into anything because it's already stable. So that means I need to put in lots of energy into the CO2 so that you convert that into petrol, diesel, or something else. But then amount of energy that has to be put in is more than what you are going to get afterwards. And so the entire economics will be negative, and no one will
Indicated.
do that. So what we are trying to do is developing these nanomaterials, catalytic material, which has the ability to take the CO2,
Mm.
and that CO2 binds strongly with the surface, and it bends and stretches the molecule. and it ideally, in simple word, it activates the CO2. Then the energy required for activated CO2 to convert into some product is less, very less. Right? That's the first objective. But then the remaining energy that is required should come from the sunlight because it's again free to use. So that means we need a material which is which has a two function. One is activating the CO2, and second function is take these solar photons and give that energy to the CO2 via different mechanism, thermal or excited electron mechanism. And this is exactly what we are trying to do, and many groups are trying to do. And black gold is one of that material which is based on the DFNS, the silica that we developed several years ago. So this material has both the function. It can take the CO2 and it can also take the light photon, and then you give that light energy to the CO2 and convert CO2 to say methane, methanol, carbon monoxide, many different molecules. Still, it is not commercially viable because these processes are still not improved. What is required, according to my group, is still a fundamental breakthrough in the materials design, a catalytic material which can do this CO2 activation very efficiently, light harvesting very efficiently, which is still not possible. And that's why there is no commercial processes even today. So the 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 solution to this entire problem is to one simple thing: designing new materials, right? So you cannot just take something that is already there, put some metal, put some doping functionalization. That is not going to work. We have tried this. Many other groups have tried this. We need to design completely new material, and we have to also think about doing these processes in a completely different way rather than simple heating or a light or electro. So that's what we are trying to do. Our expertise is in designing new materials. Starting from atoms and molecules, we make new materials. Now we have a challenge to not only make the new material, but tune their function such that they can activate CO2 really very strongly. And at the same time, they can take the photon even from the IR region of the light, not only the visible, so that you can take all the photon coming from the sunlight. Something like that we're trying to do in our lab.
Remarkable, remarkable. In fact, I would strongly urge, in fact, I'll be linking all the website links to Vivek's group. I would strongly encourage people who are interested in this to go and check their work. It's something which people should be more aware of, because general one of the things, sometimes people do make comment that scientists should work on problems which actually have translation oriented aspect. There are people who are working on it, and they have been working on it, and Vivek's lab is one of the examples. I would strongly I urge a lot of people to go and check that. It's a very important point, because people should not have this wrong notion that scientists are just sitting in ivory towers and doing nothing for the society. In fact,
Yeah.
if any important solution is going to come, it's going to come from these kind of findings and innovations, and also questions related to all the things related to these kind of problems.
Yeah.
So Vivek, you have also trained a lot of students. I have seen so many of them, including in some conferences, beautiful posters, talks. So many of them have also gone on to kind of take their own career paths. Uh, I know that you have instilled a lot of pride in the work what they do. What is the general kind of advice you give to students, which can be beneficial for others who are also kind of listening or watching this particular
Yeah, I
conversation?
think the very first statement that I should say is uh, think about a bigger challenging problem,
Chance, yeah.
right? Which will have huge chances of a failure than
Mm,
the success. But if you are motivated, and obviously experimental science need lots of experiment to be done
mm,
in the lab. That means you need to work really hard. PhD is not a simple thing
mm,
to do. So the student has to be prepared that this is a very challenging task. You need to do lots of experiment. Ideally, that is not the first priority. The first thing is you need to really challenge what is there in the
mm,
literature,
mm,
and you have to come up with completely new thoughts and new ideas. And that is where lots of students lacks, right? They want to just read the papers and then change here and there, then modify something, cook something, get the papers, right? There are now thousands and thousands of journals. Whatever you do, you will get the paper out. But then there is a lack of a novel way of thinking, completely new ideas. Look, one can ask this question to everyone, to student and a scientist: how many new ideas really came from our country,
mm,
right? we are still following most of the hot topics from originating from the Western world, right? Once there is some big paper in science or nature, everybody runs around. There's a discovery of MOF, everybody now works on MOF. There's a discovery of perovskites, everybody runs on perovskite. 2D material, okay, everyone makes a 2D material. I think that has to change, and somehow can we not think by completely different? Can we not take a completely different approach, and can we not come up with a completely new ideas? And that is challenging. That takes time. That means you are not able to publish many papers,
Mm.
and that's again
Mm.
very extremely difficult. I discussed this with my student. I said, let us say we make a decision in our group that we will not publish any paper for next 3 years. Now we completely focus and come up with something completely new.
Mm.
Frankly, this was my serious discussion with the student. They said it looks like a good idea, but then I will not get a job. What will I do? You have a permanent job, but what about me? I think
Yeah,
it's
it's a
complicated. It's complicated.
very valid question. Very
Very
valid
valid
question.
question,
Very
right?
valid question.
Because our system judges you based on
Yeah.
the number of papers and not on the quality or
Mm.
the result or novelty. So this has to again change. I think this has
Mm.
to change at a policy level. Otherwise, I don't think we're going to have a real breakthrough.
Mm.
At least in my field, I don't see that is going to happen because there's a huge pressure of publishing,
Mm.
because you are judged by the publishing. I am judged by the where I publish, and we all know this business of publishing
Mm.
is not that, it's not going in a positive direction.
I hope it's going to change, Vivek, because you know I'm glad that people like you have also been awarded for the quality of the work, and if people like you also do explicitly mention this, I'm hoping that this kind of gets percolated across, because sometimes people who have done good work, if they really speak out, it's a necessary information to go out into the ecosystem.
Yeah,
And I'm hoping, because see, one game changer which I feel is that there is now enough capability among researchers who are also looking to translate their research. I'm
yes,
no way telling everybody should do it, because see, I myself am from a physics background, and I also work on research problems which are sometimes even at the borderline of, let's say, some kind of slightly more abstract and things like that. But there is, whomsoever has capability to do that, should probably get more encouragement to go in that path and
yeah,
take it forward. And as you mentioned, there's surely societal benefit from doing good work of this kind. And yeah, and hopefully, yeah, our ecosystem actually kind of corrects some of the kind of loopholes which are there. That's
yeah,
important. Yeah, yeah. So, Vivek, one of the penultimate questions I I have is, all throughout this particular research career up to now, you have been asking some very interesting questions, and these things, this way of looking at big problems, is sometimes exciting, but also sometimes risky for a few people.
yeah,
Right, as you correctly mentioned, for example, the very nice conversation you mentioned about with your students, where they ask the question, "What will happen to the careers, etc." So you have successfully been able to also, put your work out uh, in the international forum. It's not just in national, because in science most of the things are international. Like,
yeah, yeah,
unlike sometimes in humanities, I'm no way telling or criticizing them, but for example, a lot of topics can be extremely important within, let's say, Indian ecosystem,
yeah,
but hardly anybody is going to care outside. Unfortunately, that is how the things are. But whereas when you do good science is international. It actually has impact across the world.
yeah.
So this, you have also interacted with the West, with the researchers across the West, been working there, also worked in very big places. What is your general impression, Vivek? When you do good work, do you get recognition outside India? And do colleagues really appreciate the work, or they still see work coming from India as something, okay, this person is doing very good, but generally the ecosystem might actually not be there. Yeah,
So no, my experience was positive in this sense. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
I got a more appreciation outside than
yeah.
in the country, and I think it's a straightforward. If you go there, present your work,
Hmm.
have a nice, healthy discussion, they will realize, okay, this is a good science.
Good
Because
sir.
the good science is not about publishing in big papers. That will,
Exactly.
because we all know now. that publishing in big journal has their own paths. It may not be just a good science, or may never be a good science. But when you go for give a presentation and when you have a
Mm.
discussion, that time they will realize what you what is your real science.
Yes,
And
yes,
there, if they appreciate, that means you are really doing some good science, because
yes.
the outside is very critical discussion, right? So in that
Absolutely,
sense,
absolutely.
and there is no ego, there is no jealousy
Jealous,
outside.
yeah.
In
Yeah.
India, even you do a good science, they say, "Oh, ये मेरे से अच्छा कैसे कर रहा है?" Right? And then that one statement goes in your brain, and then you always try to find the negative aspect of your research, and then try to say, "Oh, ये गड़बड़ है, वो गड़बड़ है." So that thing happens more in our country, which has to be changed than outside. So I always gotta see some of my good appreciating award came from outside,
Yes, yes, yeah.
not from India, and maybe
Yeah,
they
I
got
should mention, falling walls is a very, very reputed kind of
yes,
thing.
yeah,
And in International
in
Union
fact,
of Physics and Applied Chemistry, that's a
yeah,
very, very big organization. I'm so glad, Vivek, because, it's not every day that Indian scientists do get such recognition. And it's such a nice thing about,
yeah.
yeah,
And my learning, Pawan, is that if you are doing good science, the Western world do
will
appreciate you, because
appreciate. Yeah,
outside it's all about the quality of science. In all these things doesn't exist, right? There is no personal thing outside. In India,
absolutely.
it's other way around.
Yeah, I am hoping that that system is going to actually change. Because in terms of human resource, we are disproportionately advantageous. As
Yeah,
I mentioned, if somehow we can crack that language problem, which I still think is a barrier, unfortunately,
it's a
in
barrier.
India,
Yeah.
it's actually cuts across sociological aspects, and it goes beyond just academics. In fact, in various different
We
places.
are not tapping our potentials, right? There is a
Exactly,
hidden
exactly.
potential in every villages and everywhere, but somehow only the handfuls of students are getting
Yeah,
the opportunity to come to TIFR, IIT,
yeah,
ISOS.
yeah, yeah.
So somehow this has to be changed, and maybe possibly that's
Yeah.
the way out.
So you can also see that maybe it's the same experience. See, I'm an experimental physicist. I have seen some students who might not be very articulate in speaking. You put them in the lab, there is a magic,
Yeah,
because a researcher, an experimental researcher, can not only think via mind but also through hands.
yeah,
That sometimes, in India, there is a necessity of encouraging people to have that capability to take that, working with hands, thinking with hands, and really build things. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm
Very true.
yeah, yeah. That's something which is very important in chemistry. I'm very sure I've seen even in ISER some of the organic chemistry students. I'm amazed. They
Yeah,
run that columns and other things. That's
true.
an art. That's an art.
That's
It's
the
a
art. That's the
skill.
art.
That's an
Yeah,
art.
that
Yeah,
you
yeah,
cannot speak out, but it's the art of your hand, right? I
yeah,
remember one. I had one master student, one of the talented student.
yeah,
He came from UP. Was doing extremely well in the
yeah.
lab, asking question, data analysis, everything was great. And one day he has to give the presentation, and he
Mm.
was struggling because his
Yes.
mother tongue is Hindi,
Yeah.
and he was struggling. So I told him that okay, don't worry about English. You speak in Hindi.
Absolutely. Very
Right?
nice.
Why are you worried about the English? Wherever you need English word, you use it. Speak
Yeah.
in Hindi. And then he gave a fantastic talk. So I think what you are saying is right. It's knowledge. The language cannot be the criteria to
Criteria.
decide who is good and who is bad or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hoping things will change for better, because this with new AI based technology, there is some hope that it's
Yeah,
actually can
it is.
help a lot of people in doing it. In fact, that's one I've been telling this on the podcast. That's one place I feel it can really change the game for India, because there are so many different languages, and there it can really up the game totally and bring in new way of
Yes,
thinking.
and Pawan, we can also play a role, right? So I can give a talk in Marathi, you can in
Yes.
Kannada. So
Yeah. Yeah.
everyone can, if everyone plays a role, because then it's for me it's very easy nowadays to speak in Marathi, at least the
Exactly. Yeah.
discussion part, if
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
some equation writing, and that is enough to reach to these students. So I think
Absolutely
each one
correct.
of us has to play the role.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Vivek. In fact, people who actually need not, as you mentioned, technically you don't need to talk.
Yeah,
Even if you talk informally and have a general discussion, that's so important. That's so
yeah,
important. Wonderful, Vivek. Last question. Tell us, what are your kind of futuristic plans? I know you have a grand plan for this climate change. Also, you had a very wonderful international conference. Just
yeah.
now you finished that organizing it. and there are so many great kind of events what you also actually are part of and also organize it. Tell us a little bit more about that, and then we'll conclude.
Yeah. So I really have a three objective now for next 15 years of my
Mm.
academic life. One is to discover this so-called magical material,
Mm.
synthesize this new material which will solve the CO2 activation problem and light harvesting problem, which I feel is still not discovered. And this where we are going very fundamental just to understand how the materials are forming, what is the mechanism, what do I need to tune to change the properties, and that's the one. So 50% of my time will go into that. The another significant amount of time we are trying to now translate some of our findings. So, for example, the black gold or use of defects to convert
Mm.
CO2 to useful chemicals. We are trying to collaborate with the industries and see whether we can upscale this and translate this. And this part is extremely challenging because whatever works in the lab may not work
May not
at a
work.
bigger scale.
Absolutely.
Success rate is very very small, but we want to make attempts. We want to,
Mm.
even we fail, we want to know why the material is not working at the bigger scale, and then we come back and redesign. So that's the second attempt, the second goal. And third one is what we discuss. I think we need to go out and sensitize the public as a whole to the
Mm.
government that science and education is the key
Okay.
for any country to be developed. Same time, we also need to reach the masses, which is in villages and
Yeah.
those who are not being getting exposed to the science, where we need to use our own language, our mother tongue.
Mm.
So these are some of the things that. So I also organize big conferences to bring people and have a discussion about catalysis or materials. At the same time, I'm also trying to go to different colleges and schools and trying to organize similar meetings there to sensitize community.
Wonderful, Vivek. I wish you and your research group all the best. Continue to do great work and inspire people. It's so important for the ecosystem, for the country, and for the world. That's
Yes.
all put together. That's such an important initiative. It's been a privilege. Thank you very much for your time, and
Thank
I
you.
I, I really enjoyed conversing with the, yeah.
Thank you, Pawan. It's same here. I always enjoy talking to you, but this time it was more formal.
Formal, yeah, exactly. In
Yes,
fact,
yes, yes.
with Vivek, whenever I've spoken, it's been informal in some conference and other
Conferences,
places.
yeah, yes. But
Yeah,
now this was
yeah,
a very unique
yeah, yeah.
way of talking to you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Vivek. This is Pratidwani, where we try to humanize science. This time with the one and the only Vivek Polshettiwar.
Appreciate
Polshettiwar. Thank you, Vivek.
Thanks,
Thank
thanks.
you.